Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into an incredible story about how faith, empire, and personal tragedy created a perfect storm that literally tore 19th century China apart. It's a story of absolute devastation for sure, but it's also about how that devastation unintentionally planted the seeds of a new modern nation.
I want to start right here with this single, chilling instruction. It was given to a 5-year-old boy back in 1853. Just think about that for a second. What kind of world collapses so completely that a mother's last, most loving lesson to her son is how to take his own life?
Well, this was the brutal reality for that little boy. His name was Guanji, and he was caught right in the crossfire of the Battle of Zhapu, a brutal clash that showed just how paper-thin his entire world really was. So, to put this all into perspective, Guanji's story begins at this absolute flashpoint. The Qing Empire, which had ruled for centuries, was getting hammered from the outside by Western powers in things like the Opium War, and at the exact same time, it was being ripped apart from the inside by one of the deadliest civil wars in human history. And look, the real horror of this time, it wasn't just soldiers fighting soldiers. It was this. Ordinary people, neighbors, being forced to make choices that are just unthinkable. This was the price people were willing to pay to escape what they saw as a fate worse than death. Okay, so to make sense of all this chaos, here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to follow the intersecting stories of 3 very different people, because their lives show us exactly how this giant historical storm actually felt on a human level. All right, let's meet the people whose lives were completely forged in this fire, starting with that young boy, the one who was taught that death was better than dishonor.
After his father died a Manchu hero in battle, young Guanji was raised to become the living embodiment of the old imperial system, a system that, let's be honest, was already on life support.
So he's raised in this elite clan. He masters archery, horsemanship, the whole warrior package. But the real lesson, the one drilled into him every single day, was that honor was worth more than life itself. He believed, with every fiber of his being, in the absolute glory of his Manchu heritage and the Qing Empire.
But here's the thing. The very system he was trained to die for, it was rotting from the inside out. And you could feel that decay sharpest not in some palace, but on the ground, in the lives of the most ordinary people.
Half a country away, a peasant woman named Mei Ling was facing a completely different kind of collapse. Her world wasn't destroyed by a sword, it was destroyed by what came through a pipe.
Her family's entire life, their savings, their stability, their future, it was all just gone, sucked away by the opium addiction that was sweeping the country like a plague. This left her husband with absolutely no choice but to take this massive, desperate gamble, signing on as an indentured laborer to build railroads in some far-off place called America. And then, into this swirling vortex of chaos, walks our third figure, a foreigner. And he does it willingly. He's not looking for wealth or power. He's looking for a miracle.
So you've got this British missionary, Cecil, and he's feeling pretty disillusioned, Like his work isn't making any real difference. And then he starts hearing these wild rumors about a massive rebellion, a Christian rebellion, led by a man who claims, get this, to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. I mean, can you imagine hearing that? He just had to go see for himself.
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute engine of this whole conflict, the Taiping Rebellion. And we need to be clear here, this wasn't just another war. This was a crusade that would end up costing more than 20 million lives. Just let that number sink in for a moment.
So what was this Taiping Heavenly Kingdom? Well, it was this really potent and deadly mix. It took a very unique version of Christianity and combined it with a fiercely violent anti-government agenda. They basically weaponized faith. They promised their followers a literal heavenly kingdom right here on Earth.
But as Cecil found out when he got to the rebel capital of Nanjing, wow, the gulf between the promise and the reality was just staggering. On one hand, you have this beautiful idea of a world of equality, a heavenly kingdom. The reality? It was built on extreme tyranny, families were forcibly separated, and just unspeakable brutality, like the systematic murder of every single Manchu, man, woman, and child they found in the city.
And this was Cecil's terrifying conclusion. He came looking for the future of his faith in China. Instead, what he found was a political monster dressed up in religious clothing, a perfect ideology to justify absolute, total cruelty.
Right, so this Taiping storm, it did more than just kill millions of people. It laid bare just how incredibly weak the Qing Empire had become. It wasn't just that they couldn't stop the rebellion, the whole system was just rotting from the inside out.
And think back to Guanxi, the very military elite he was raised to glorify. The Manchu bannermen, this group that had once conquered all of China. By his time, they were a shadow of their former selves. In fact, many were so poor, they were basically beggars on the street, unable to feed their families, let alone defend an empire.
And yet, and this is what's so incredible to me, even in this world of total collapse and unimaginable brutality, you could still find these little sparks of humanity.
So picture this. An imperial official, a magistrate named Shirong, captures a top enemy commander. Now, by all the rules, he should execute him on the spot. But he doesn't. He recognizes the man. It's an acquaintance from his past. And in that moment, he chooses mercy over duty. He just lets him go. It's this tiny crack in the brutal imperial machine, but it shows that personal decency could still exist, even when the whole world was on fire.
All right, so let's bring this all home. Because this perfect storm of chaos, decay, and rebellion, well, it had this completely unexpected result. It accidentally laid the groundwork for a new, modern China.
Think about it. China's modernization wasn't some grand, brilliant plan. No, it was a desperate reaction to total failure. The social collapse from opium pushes people like Mei Ling's husband overseas to literally become the labor force that builds America. The military collapse of Guanxi's world forces the old Manchu government to give power to new, more effective Han Chinese leaders. And what do those new leaders do? They realize the only way to survive is to adopt Western weapons and tactics, creating the very first modern Chinese armies. And so, as our story ends, Mei Ling gives birth to a daughter, and she names her Bright Moon, a small, fragile symbol of hope in a completely shattered world. We're seeing the birth of a modern nation, rising right from these ashes. But it leaves us with this one final, really haunting question. How often is the birth of our modern world paid for by the suffering of millions of lives we've all but forgotten?